Alrighty, welcome back to Shut Up and Ball. I am Aaron Chow, accompanied by Mr. John Harris, of course, and we are back doing the Week 13 picks against the spread for the NFL, of course. No other league we're making picks for right now. But otherwise, obviously, time of recording is right before Thursday, so just going to keep our Thursday picks kind of brief. Oh, but before I'll just do that right now because that was the less important part. I'm going New England. John's going Buffalo. Spread is Buffalo favored by 3.5 at New England. But by the time everyone else seeing this, it's already happened. So I guess we'll see who's right because that's a difference off the bat. And that will be big because last week John went 9-7. I went 8-8. So John got a game back. So overall, John's one game behind me. If you really want to know our records, I'm 89-91 going into week 13. John's going 88-92. So we're literally at the 500 lines, like literally 2 games off. Well, me, John, a couple games off. So of 500, but obviously John won behind me. So we're doing okay-ish there. That's why we're not gambling. But anyways, going to be obviously sharing the rest of our week 13 picks going now. And obviously, like I said, went with the Thursday games. So now we're going to jump to the Sunday games. Starting with your division, John, a divisional matchup. 2 teams kind of trending in opposite directions, at least in recent weeks. And it's going to be the Washington football team, Washington Commanders. I keep forgetting they actually found a name. They are favored by 2.5, going to MetLife to play the New York Giants. Giants, obviously, a couple tough losses. But regardless, though, who do you have between these two, John? You going with Washington or the Giants?
I'm going to go with the Giants. I say it all the time. Divisional matchups, I tend to go with the underdog just because they're very close games. I think the Giants are also coming off a couple disappointing results. And I don't know. I feel like they're going to want to bounce back here. Didn't they? They lost to the Cowboys and then they lose to like the Lions the week before. Yes. Yeah. So back-to-back losses. I think Daboll's a good coach. I think that he's going to figure some stuff out here and at the very least keep it close. Wouldn't be shocked if this is like a 1-point game because it's a divisional matchup and I don't think these teams are that far off. Also, the Giants are at home, so you kind of get that home field advantage. I don't know. I got a feeling this one's going to be like one of those super tight games. My hope is that if it is a super tight one, that the Giants can come out on top just for the spread here. But regardless, I don't feel too confident in this game because I do think that they're in interesting spots where Washington is sort of ascending. They're figuring things out, but the Giants are sort of declining. They're getting, a couple losses here. And so I don't know who's going to come out on top in this one, but I do think it's going to be tight.
Yeah, I'm more following, keeping an eye on the trend for both teams. I'm going with Washington. You've seen in recent weeks, Giants passing offense has been lesser than, and then I don't really put that all on Daniel Jones. It's just they've lost a lot of receivers, and it's gone down to it's really just Darius Slayton and then Richie James. But probably Saquon's your best weapon, and I think Washington will be ready for that. Their defense has gotten better in recent weeks, and as we mentioned before, Heineke doing solid, and the run game's kind of found their way too with Brian Robinson, the duo of him and Antonio Gibson. So, especially 2.5. I'm just going with Washington. I wouldn't be shocked if it's somehow kind of what you're saying is going to be a close game. It does scare me that way, but I'll take my chances, and I am going with the Washington Commanders to cover and win. So another difference right there off the board for us. Now we're going over to Minnesota, where the Vikings, they are at home, favored by 3.5, hosting Mike White and the New York Jets. John, do you think the Mike White magic continues, or will Minnesota take care of business?
I think Minnesota should win this game, but I say should because the Jets defense is just really good, man. They're playing really well. And I think if Mike White doesn't turn the ball over, if he can keep things simple and just allow Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore and all the different playmakers they have just kind of do their thing and the defense can hold strong, I think this can be another tight game. But I'm going with the Jets here because, I don't know, Minnesota, they're banged up in the secondary. I don't want to get too far into it, but there's some off the field stuff that just came out today about Justin Jefferson, which shouldn't impact his playing time, but it could just be a distraction. I don't know. There's just some things going on right now around the Vikings in terms of health and all this kind of stuff that I think maybe they're floundering just a little bit. They did have that get right game against the Patriots last week, but even then, like, the Patriots put up a ton of points on them, and it was a pretty competitive one that could have been a lot closer to if that, Hunter Henry ruling went another way. So I don't know. I just feel like with the Jets right now, they're playing hot. There's a lot of motivation behind this team, especially defensively, to, come out and perform. And I think that against the Vikings, who, if Jefferson dominates, like, their offense looks really good, but when he doesn't, they sort of, I don't want to say they get predictable, but like Dalvin Cook, he's had some inefficient games recently. Adam Thielen sort of occasionally steps up. But when Justin Jefferson's not really like dominating, they look beatable. So I'm going to go with the Jets here just because I think that defense is really strong.
I'm also going with the Jets. I think the Vikings will win this one. But Vikings defense hasn't been that great. We saw New England kind of move the ball at them for the most part last Thursday. So yeah, I'm just factoring the Jets defense. I think they'll limit the run game and make life tough in the passing game. But end of the day, I think Minnesota will pull it out. But hey, I wouldn't be shocked if the Jets defense causes some havoc. They get a lead and they can just kind of sit on that lead and win this one out. So yeah, it's one of those where I'm kind of glad I have the spread, because it was straight pick 'em. Might be a little tough, or if it's a smaller spread like 1.5 or 0.5, it might be a little bit tougher. But I'm going with the Jets here, kind of riding this. Especially you mentioned the defense, riding this wave of momentum, and they are talented too. So it's just all adding up. So we are both going with the Jets to at least cover that 3.5 points. Now we go to a very interesting matchup between the Philadelphia Eagles at Philly. They are favored by 4.5, hosting the Tennessee Titans. Titans coming off that tough loss against the Bengals. Obviously, Philly, ran wild, literally, against my Packers Sunday night. So, John, you think the Titans can slow them down, kind of get back on the winning track here, or does Philly keep rolling?
I think this is going to be a really interesting game because Philly has had some, I don't want to say questionable performances recently, but like some close nail biter kind of games. And the Titans are one of those teams that, like, when they get you into that kind of spot, Mike Vrabel he's such a great coach that he can oftentimes come out on top in those situations. And I think that with Philly's run defense right now, the injuries they have along the defensive line, I think that Derrick Henry could have success here, which naturally I think can open up the passing game for Tannehill and Treylon Burks and Robert Woods and all those guys. So I think on the back of Derrick Henry's success, this pass game can be more efficient than it might normally would be if Philly was able to consistently stop the run, because we know the Philly has a good secondary, but even them, like, they're dealing with injuries. I think Chauncey Gardner-Johnson might not be playing in this one. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I saw he sustained an injury recently. So I don't know. I just feel like the Titans, this is a game where, like, at the 4.5, I just feel like it's a little bit too big for me. Like, I could see them losing by a field goal. I could see them winning this game. There's just a lot of methods in which I could see them covering. And so I'm going to go with Tennessee here. Also, I know there's the added story of, like, the A.J. Brown revenge game, but I do think that in the way that he left, because there was some very public demands and tweets and all that kind of stuff, there might be that extra motivation on the Titans sideline to ensure that he doesn't have that big sort of revenge game too. Because I know in those revenge games, often we focus on the player, but I do think in this case, there could be some ill will on the other side too, where, like, that motivates them a little more as well. So I'm going with Tennessee.
Yeah, I'm going with Tennessee. I think, kind of like I mentioned with the Jets, they're at least going to keep this game close, do typical Tennessee things. I think the defense matches up really well with Philly's offense. They have a really good run defense, especially their front four, and they do a lot of creative things on the back end. And you've mentioned it, especially in recent pretty much the whole year, though, that it's nothing much over the middle. So I imagine they're probably going to challenge Jalen Hurts in the passing offense to do that. And they have. This is one of the better defenses in the league, especially well-rounded on both ends. And on the flip side, maybe not as much firepower as some other teams, but I think Tennessee will have success moving the ball. We've seen Traylon Burks, kind of have starting to gain some momentum in recent weeks. Him and Robert Woods. Robert Woods still, getting healthy and healthier off that ACL injury, and probably just more acquainted with his offense. And obviously, there's still Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill. So, I think it's going to be a typical Tennessee game. I honestly wouldn't be shocked if they win this game, but I definitely think that they'll keep it close. I just don't foresee them. I don't foresee Philly being able to blow them out. Kind of like I mentioned the Green Bay game. It was a 1-score game, but really Philly was in control the whole time. I don't think it'll be that easy this time for Philly. As I believe Tennessee, along with John, will pose lots of problems for Philadelphia. So we'll see how Philly will answer that matchup. But now we go over to Detroit, where the Lions are at home. And they're also favored by 1.5, hosting the Jacksonville Jaguars. It was an interesting spread. Maybe Vegas has been kind of catching on to Detroit. They've been pretty good at home. One before they lost the last game. They're on a 3-game win streak. Jacksonville did get a big win against Baltimore, but once again, maybe they believe in Detroit at home. John, who do you have between these two? And also, sorry, matchup between the top two worst teams of last year. So a little interesting tidbit there.
Yeah, Trayvon Walker versus Aiden Hutchinson. I don't trust Detroit, even though they're at home. I think that their defense is just in a spot right now, which I believe Jeff Okudah also sustained an injury recently. I don't know if it's going to hold him out. He might play, but still something to be noted. I think their defense is going to be the problem here. Trevor Lawrence last week, big confidence builder, I think, for him. You come out, you win that game the way that they did. I think they carry that momentum at least into this week against a Detroit secondary that is arguably the worst in the league. So I don't know. I just think that like Christian Kirk, Zay Jones on the outside, these guys can get winning matchups. If ETN plays, that helps even more because you got the speed guy that you can use in your run game. I just think that Trevor Lawrence off of last week, I'm expecting another big performance here. So I'm going with Jacksonville. I do think that Detroit can have some success offensively. But I don't know. I trust Jacksonville's offense more in this matchup than I do Detroit's offense in this matchup because Jacksonville, although their defense isn't like elite by any means, they're decent.
Yeah, I'm going with Jacksonville also. Their offense is kind of clicking. Trevor Lawrence had a really good game against Baltimore, and he's been solid for the most part this season. Consistency in critical moments has been an issue for him, but I imagine going from Baltimore to Detroit, like you already said, Detroit's secondary not that great, definitely not that talented. So I think they'll have their way there. And on the flip side, does scare me a little bit. Lions do have a good offensive line, patient with the run. I feel like they could probably overpower the Jaguars front seven, but I don't know, I'm just kind of banking on the fact that Jaguars maybe will create some havoc on defense, maybe get a turnover, get a couple key stops. End of the day, I'm just more confident in the Jaguars and their weapons and who they have at this point in time. So I'm going with Jacksonville also, 1.5, basically kind of a pick 'em. But yeah, I was a little surprised, like I already started off with, that Detroit was favored, but hey, maybe, I guess technically on neutral field, they always say, you get 3 points for being at home. So technically neutral field, Jacksonville's favored. So John and I both going Jacksonville over Detroit, or at least maybe they cover that 1.5. Now we go over to Baltimore, who just lost to Jacksonville. The Ravens are at home. They are favored by 8.5 against the Denver Broncos. Russell Wilson in the game coming off that tough loss against the Panthers. So both teams coming off a loss. For the Ravens trying to maintain their place in the wild AFC race, and Denver's just trying to keep their season alive at this point. So who do you have here, John, between Baltimore and Denver?
So this one was like one of the harder games of the week for me because Baltimore's just been in a lot of tight games recently, and they've had some disappointing performances, like even the win against the Panthers. I think most people, despite the fact they won, would say 13-3 was not a very inspiring result. But Denver, on the other hand, they're really bad. So I don't know. I don't know how to go with this one. So I just went with a coin flip, and I'm going with Denver because the spread is so large. Like I look at the last I don't know, handful of games that the Ravens have played, not even handful. Like if we look at most of their season, I think they've had they've had 4 games that have been more than one possession games. And one of those games was that game. Well, one of them was week 1 against the Jets. So, it's week 1. And then the other one was 2 weeks ago in that Ravens game or that Panthers game where they only put up 13 points. So I don't know. They're in a lot of these tight games. Like they beat the Browns by 3. They lose to the Giants by 4. They beat the Buccaneers by 5. They lose to the Jaguars by 1. They beat the Bengals by 2. Just all these kind of tight games that like, I feel like Denver's defense is at least good enough to keep it within a touchdown. So the 8.5 feels big for me. I'm going Denver. Don't feel confident in it because if Baltimore can hit like 24 points, Denver seems like they're kind of capping out at like 14, 17-ish range. So that'll get me nervous, but I'm trusting Denver's defense.
14, 17 might be generous, but anyways, I think they've been stuck at that 13-point mark for a lot of weeks.
But also just random note, when Clint Kubiak, he has taken over the offensive play calling, I think now 2 weeks now, their offense has been averaging less points than they were when Hackett was calling the plays. So it's only been 2 games, small sample size, but still.
Yeah. It's tough because, Baltimore, you mentioned they haven't been as impressive in recent weeks. The offense has been lackluster and does help they're going up against Denver, but obviously pending the J.K. Dobbins coming back. And if he isn't there, still have Gus Edwards if he's active. I think Baltimore's run offense will be enough, to get their offense moving along. We saw Carolina had some success running the ball against Denver. They stayed patient with it. And then on the flip side, I just have no confidence in Denver's offense to do enough and take advantage of Baltimore. Baltimore's defense too has been quietly better, getting better as the season's gone along. Obviously, they added, Roquan Smith at the deadline, and he's been helping shore up the defense. So yeah, I'm just, just not. I'm not going to put my eggs in the Denver basket. 8.5. I know it's scary because I am scared that it's just going to be a 20-16, 17-13 type game. But I just have no confidence in Denver, and I think Baltimore might cover this one too. So I'm going with Baltimore. John's going with Denver, to at least cover, and maybe but yeah, I think Baltimore will cover that 8.5. So that is that one between us. That's also the old AFC rematch from a couple of years ago, but they used to be a good matchup. Now, maybe not so much. But now we go over to see the Pittsburgh Steelers. They are favored by 1.5. I think it's one of the few times they've been favored in recent weeks. Anyways, they're going to Atlanta. The old cover Kings. They haven't really been that the last few weeks. Anyhow, John, who are you going with between the Steelers and the Falcons here?
I'm going with the Falcons. The Steelers, I don't know. It could be just I'm to a fault. I just have this rule with them where like when they're the underdogs, I often take them. When they're the favorites, I just feel uneasy. The Falcons and their run game, I think they're not going to be super turnover heavy. I don't think that with the limited amount that they pass the ball that they're going to allow like TJ Watt to control this game. And then on Pittsburgh's side, like Najee Harris might not play, Benny Snell might not play, so the run attack might be Jaylen Warren and your fourth string guy, and Jaylen Warren is even coming off an injury. I don't know. There's just a lot of concern in that run game. The offensive line I still have concern about, and so I don't think that they're necessarily going to be able to expose Atlanta's defense as much as they might be if they're fully healthy. So I'm going with Atlanta.
All right. Well, I'm going with Pittsburgh. I have confidence, a little more confidence in their passing game. Kenny Pickett's been better the last few weeks. And on the flip side, I just don't have much confidence in Atlanta's offense. And you mentioned, they probably lean on the run game. I think that helps Pittsburgh out because it makes them one-dimensional. Probably throw a couple of crazy blitzes and concepts and maybe leave their guys on islands more since, they're probably not afraid of Mariota dicing them up. So I just think that Atlanta's going to be forced out of those run situations, especially if they do fall behind. And like I mentioned before, just not very confident in Atlanta's passing game. And I don't think that they'll be playing from a position of strength where they can sit on the run game for a majority of the game. So I'm going with Pittsburgh. John going with Atlanta. So another difference. We've already got 4 on the board there, as we are both going opposite sides there. 1.5, basically kind of picking who's going to win at that point. But I think I have to go back and look. I wonder how many like 1.5 point spreads like the underdog is actually covered. I have to go back and check, because obviously our spreads are a little different than some. But anyhow, now we go over to an NFC North divisional matchup. My team, Green Bay Packers. We are favored by 3.5 going to the Windy City of Chicago. Justin Fields may play. He did put in a full practice today as of Thursday. That's when we're recording this. So trending towards him probably playing, which would be a big deal for the Bears offense, since we all saw Trevor Siemian last week, granted against a good Jets defense. So, John, who are you going with here between my Packers and the Chicago Bears?
I'm going with Chicago, and for one reason only. Green Bay apparently struggles against running quarterbacks. This might be a very small sample size, limited mindset of mine, because I'm thinking back of like the Colin Kaepernick thing, and then Jalen Hurts last week has a similar performance. But I just think that Justin Fields, I'm expecting him to play. He practiced today in full. He was removed off the injury report, I believe. So I'm expecting him to play, and I think that his legs are going to be the difference maker. I still think that Green Bay should win, but I think that Chicago can keep it close. Once again, divisional game, underdog. I tend to favor the underdog in those divisional matchups, on top of the running quarterback thing.
All right, well, I'm going with Green Bay. We mentioned, when we broke down the Jets game between them last week, Chicago's defense not very good. And they said lost Eddie Jackson for the rest of the year. Like, I don't know any difference makers that really scares me in regards to the Packers offense, which, hasn't been amazing, but it's been better as of recent weeks. And on the flip side, I know you mentioned the whole, mobile quarterbacks thing can be an issue, which does scare me, especially if Fields does play. But especially with no Darnell Mooney, really only Chase Claypool, and maybe you can say Cole Kmet to scare you in the passing game. I just feel like Green Bay should be able to, take those guys away in the passing game. And especially since he just got diced up by Philly last week, I would assume they're going to come out with a better plan of attack. Like, I don't know, it just seemed like especially in the first half last week, I don't know, they just didn't expect them to run as much with Jalen Hurts. I think it's like they didn't expect that. And obviously with Justin Fields, already played him once, earlier in the year, so they kind of have a feel for a little bit of what the offense wants to do. Obviously, Chicago's offense has evolved since then, as we've seen. But maybe I'm factoring in the Justin Fields injury. Who knows how much that might hamper him running or throwing. So I'm going with Green Bay. Kind of a desperation thing, and Aaron, quote unquote, owns Chicago, so I'm assuming he's going to want to, at least get that win, go to the bye week, and then we'll assess, like we mentioned last video, we'll assess what happens at the quarterback position going forward. But I'm going Green Bay. I think we cover and obviously win. So we will see. Obviously, our fifth disagreement there. So now we head over to the Browns, where the Cleveland Browns are favored by 7.5, going to Houston. Deshaun Watson will be back for this game, and I'm assuming starting. So that is obviously the big headline there. John, how do you think Houston will get their revenge and maybe get their second win of the year, or do you think Cleveland takes care of business and covers the spread?
I am going with Cleveland here. I know the spread's rather large, and I know there's some off-the-field concerns and drama and all this kind of stuff going on here. But Houston's just not a very good team, and they struggle to stop the run, and they're going against Nick Chubb and the Browns' run attack. And I know Deshaun Watson's going to be playing, and I think he's going to be very hyped up, and people might think he's going to come out there and dominate, and he might. But honestly, I think the game plan is going to be, Deshaun, you haven't played in 2 years, so we're going to run the ball a lot, and their defense is not going to be able to stop us. and then maybe we'll do some play action, some stuff off of that, third downs you can throw, and get him like 20, 24, 25 throw attempts. So I don't think that he's going to come out there and light the world up. And I think because of that specific offensive game plan is going to directly expose the Houston Texans' lack of run defense. So I'm going with Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, I'm going with the Browns also, even though I am a little scared. I mentioned, Cleveland Browns also don't have a great run defense. I mean, Houston, once you get ahead of them, you take the run, they have to start throwing the ball. I mean, do we know if Kyle Allen's going to, I'm assuming he's going to be the quarterback again this week, right? They haven't mentioned that David. So yeah, there's that. And then I don't expect Deshaun to come out and light the world on fire, but like you already said, they're going to lean on Nick Chubb, and this Houston defense, not great in terms of stopping the run, and especially being at Houston in that dome. I would assume it's a little bit familiar-ish territory too for Deshaun, but regardless, in the dome, Amari Cooper definitely plays better indoors and that gang. So, yeah, I'm going with Cleveland too to cover this one. They're probably trying to, obviously their season's quote unquote still alive, but they're in a pretty deep hole. But I expect them to be at least trying to put the pieces together before the offseason to gain some momentum going into next year with, since they'll have Deshaun week 1, hopefully, for them next year, and they can get off to a better start. So, I'm going with Cleveland too. Just when it comes to Houston, Cleveland's the more talented team. So we're both going Browns to cover that big spread. Got another spread with the same exact spread almost, basically. It's the Seattle Seahawks, though. They are favored by 7.5 going to the LA Rams. How the Rams have fallen from grace. No Aaron Donald this game as well. I'm guessing there's going to be no Matthew Stafford. I'll double check that in a second, but looks like it's going to be Bryce Perkins again. So, John, do you think Seattle takes care of business, or can the Rams keep it close at home?
I'm not touching the Rams. I don't care if all of a sudden they, start covering everything. I'm just not touching them because I'm kind of expecting them to throw in the towel at this point. Like, no Aaron Donald, no Cooper Kupp. I'm assuming no Matthew Stafford. Wouldn't be shocked. Also, no Allen Robinson. Wouldn't be shocked if we start to see, Jalen Ramsey maybe get sat out just for maintaining his health. I know that he's not hurt or anything, but just to make sure, because there's no reason to play. Like they have almost nobody, even like their left tackle who's making $13 million a year, Joel Noteboom, he's out. Like they're missing too many key players, too many key pieces. I'm not touching the Rams. I'm going Seattle.
Yeah. As of a day ago, I'm looking through the sleep rap, Matthew Stafford unlikely to play week 13. Still in concussion protocol. Also, no Allen Robinson, just as the sprinkle on top. So, not that he was lighting up the world either, but another, key talent / weapon not available. So, I'm not even going to go any further. I am also going Seattle to win and cover here. But hey, maybe the Rams might have a, kind of a pride game and keep it close, for their pride. But definitely super. I know people say super hangover is real, but also they've just been killed by injuries, and some guys retiring. So we'll see if they can reload next year. But we both have Seattle covering. Now we go to one of the more exciting games of the afternoon, and that is at San Francisco, where the 49ers are favored by 4.5, hosting the Miami Dolphins. A little bit of master versus apprentice here per se, with Kyle Shanahan and Mike McDaniels. Who are you rolling with for this one, John?
I'm going with the Niners, and it's for one reason only. Number one, a couple reasons actually. Number one, they're at home. Number two, Mike McDaniels and the Dolphins are on the hype train right now, and I just think that, I don't know, proteges oftentimes, maybe there's a little bit of gamesmanship of like the guy that you're coming from, he knows what you're gonna do, and I think that for Shanahan, he might know what old Mike McDaniel is going to try and do in this one. So I'm going the Niners just because of that. Also, the Niners, they're getting healthy right now, despite the fact that last week they kind of had some guys get a little banged up in the running back room, but they're starting to get healthy. And I don't know. I think this is one of those ones where Shanahan's going to know the explosive weapons they got on the other side, and he's going to do everything in terms of defense to stop that, but also really limit them and their time of possession on the offensive side as well. So I'm going with the Niners.
Another disagreement. I'm going with Miami. I think the Niners will take care of business and win, but I think Miami, especially the defense, could pose some issues for them. Although that will be a very interesting matchup because it is a very aggressive Miami defense too. So we'll see how much if they try to be a little more conservative and make Jimmy G make some plays. But Niners run game hasn't been great in recent weeks, so that's a concern. But on the flip side, I do think that the San Francisco will slow down this passing attack. But my question is just for how much and how long, because you have to defend both Jalen Waddle and obviously Tyreek Hill. And we know they have, pretty good front seven, and Fred Warner is, if not one of the best, or the best, one of the best, coverage linebackers, and they have good safeties on the backside. But I just still worry that Miami's going to find ways to, get their playmakers the ball, similar to how San Fran does. And it's just so hard to cover both those guys. And if you cover both those guys, then you have Gesicki one-on-one. I think Miami will at least keep it close. Wouldn't be shocked if they win here. But if I had to pick, though, I do think San Francisco wins this game, but I think it's going to be a close one. So I'm threading the needle a little bit there. So I'm going Miami. John's going San Francisco to cover. So we will see what happens in that matchup. Now we go to a rematch of the AFC Championship game from last year, and that is the Kansas City Chiefs, favored by 2.5, going to Cincinnati. So a different setting. Last year was in Kansas City. This one at Cincy. Bengals been quietly kind of, rising back up to AFC, likely to get Jamar Chase and Joe Mixon back for this one, so that could be huge. John, where are you leaning for this one?
I'm riding with the Bengals. I don't know. I just feel like Jamar Chase is going to have a really big game. There's been some trash talk between him, Hayden Hurst, T. Higgins versus Justin Reed. Really random kind of thing where Justin Reed's calling out Hayden Hurst. Kind of random. But I just think that Jamar Chase, I feel like he's in store for a big game. They're going to try and get him involved early and often. I think that Joe Mixon coming back can help the run game quite a bit. And also, I think that the Bengals offense is just playing on a really high level right now. And I do think the Chiefs are going to be able to play at a high level as well. But I trust the Bengals defense right now more than I do Kansas City's. And so I think this could turn into a shootout. And I don't know. I just got a feeling that Cincinnati's going to come out on top.
Yeah, that part I agree with you with. I have more confidence in the Bengals defense as a whole. And I will say Bengals offensive line too. We mentioned this against Tennessee. They've been better in recent weeks. They haven't been letting Joe Burrow get killed. Now, granted, Bengals too have been a little more patient with the run game, probably because Jamar Chase has been out. So I think that's in a way helped their offensive line kind of shape into form, live up to the expectations that most of us had before the season that it would be better than last year. But I just feel like, the Chiefs, they love these type of games where, they have a chip on their shoulder because Cincinnati beat them last year, and they should have won that game last year because they're up at halftime at home. I just think that's going to provide some motivation. Kansas City's also a better, well-rounded team. They're more willing to commit to the run too. I am a little bit scared too that no Tyreek Hill, so that's always a factor. I think this may be a game where we really do see that come to light, that they may miss him a little bit just to make things easier on Travis Kelce and everyone underneath. And they still know Mecole Hardman, so it's not even that Hardman could maybe take up that role. Kadarius Toney, last I saw, he was still, I'm not sure what the update today was, but he was still questionable with the hamstring issue. So a little scary, but Sky Moore's been contributing recently, and Mahomes has still been balling out. So I'm leaning with Kansas City. I think their well balanced offense they'll have to obviously lean on them this game, and I'm anticipating Chris Jones to make a play or two because he's quietly become obviously not Aaron Donald level, but he's probably right now, if not the best, one of the best defensive tackles, as he always is. But he's been playing really well recently, so I expect him to make a few plays, and we'll see if Justin Reed can live up to the trash talk and such. But it's just funny because he wasn't even on the team last year, but whatever. I guess it's good that he has his new teams back anyway. So that will be interesting to see how that revenge game or that rematch goes. And to give another rematch, we have another one here, but their division rivals. So, but this one carries a little more weight because it is the Las Vegas Raiders at Las Vegas, favored by 1.5 against the LA Chargers. And the game I was referencing, was last year, week 18, where they tie, both teams go to the playoffs, and there's the whole it's brand. Regardless, there's the whole thing. Remember, Raiders won that one. How do you think this game goes, John?
I'm rocking with the Chargers underdog. I know that we're in Las Vegas, and so technically with a 3-point, home advantage, the line would indicate that Vegas believes the Chargers are better, which I think they are. But I think they're a little bit better than 1.5, because if you take the 1.5 point favorite for the Raiders and you add or subtract the home field advantage, they're basically saying the Chargers are like a 1.5 point favorite on like a neutral field. I think the Chargers are a little bit better than that. I think with Keenan Allen finally healthy, that's kind of like your safety blanket, the guy you got all the chemistry with for Justin Herbert. I think Eckler can have some success here. I think that despite the offensive line issues, the Raiders just haven't been able to consistently get pressure unless it's Max Crosby and you can divert extra attention to him. So I'm going to go with the Chargers here. I'm hoping the Raiders offensively, Devontae Adams and Derek Carr, can have a good game because I have them both in fantasy. But I'm going to go with the Chargers here to win and cover.
All right, well, another disagreement in the books for us because I'm going with the Raiders, especially, coming off that big game from Josh Jacobs. We've mentioned the Chargers' run defense has not been great, and I think that would be a big issue is Josh Jacobs in the run game. And then we've seen Devontae Adams and other contributors in the past game do enough. And on the flip side for the Chargers, life's been tough for this offense. They can't really run the ball. No Mike Williams. I know Keenan Allen still contributing, and obviously Austin Eckler. But I just feel like the Raiders might have a good plan of attack to slow down the short to intermediate pass game that they've kind of been stuck with. The LA Chargers been doing that. They've been stuck kind of living in because they don't really have a deep threat, and their offensive line's been lesser than this year, obviously due to injury. So yeah, I'm going with the Raiders. I just think they kind of have their number and riding a little bit of a wave of momentum here late this season too, especially on the legs literally of Josh Jacobs. So disagreement there. I'm going Raiders. John is going with the Chargers. So now we go to your game, John. It's a Sunday nighter, right? Am I reading this right?
Prime time. They did not flex it out.
Probably wishing. Yeah. Anyhow, it is the biggest spread of the week too, so that goes to tell you a lot. Your Dallas Cowboys, they're favored by 10.5, hosting Jeff Saturday and the Indianapolis Colts. Where are you leaning for this one, John?
Well, before anyone throws up a stink of why didn't they flex this game out, I honestly just think it's because Jerry Jones has that much influence in the league, especially in the owner's room. I think he's probably one of the most respected owners there. He's been there for a very long time and just has probably a lot of power. So as a Cowboys fan, I agree with everyone. I kind of wish this game was flexed out. We could see Kansas City versus Cincinnati personally, or even San Francisco, Miami, although I know Miami got flexed into Sunday night next week. So that's why I'm suggesting Kansas City and Cincinnati. Anyway, I'm going to go with the Colts. 10.5 point spread. It's a little bit big. The Cowboys, Dak Prescott recently has had sort of a habit of trying to be really aggressive early, and that's kind of come back to bite him with these interceptions recently. And so if that happens, I think the Colts could keep it a little closer, especially early, and then maybe just the way of the game flow, they can keep it close. I still think the Cowboys should win, but even as we saw last week, like the Giants, Cowboys were up big and they took the foot off the gas pedal, and the Giants backdoor covered. They still lost by 8 points, but they backdoor covered. So I think that kind of scenario could happen here. Also, the Cowboys' run defense is still a little bit of a concern. Jonathan Taylor in this offensive line, assuming they run the ball a lot, should be able to have some semblance of success. So I'm going to go with the Colts to cover, although I do think Dallas wins.
I completely agree with you. Pretty much everything you said. I think the Colts keep this close, just what they've done. Their defense is very underrated. Kind of like with the Broncos, kind of been the saving grace of the season where their defense has kept them in a lot of games. And I don't foresee Dallas having many issues. I foresee them having control most of this game. And, obviously going to limit the Colts passing opportunities and, probably win that battle with their defense. But yeah, I think big thing will be if Dak can take care of the ball, which I'm assuming that's something that they're probably drilling in his head. And I think the way too that y'all ended the Giants game is encouraging. But nonetheless, yeah, the Colts, they just 10.5's a lot, and the Colts just find ways to kind of like the Titans, just muck these games up, make it kind of an ugly-ish affair, even though that, they really haven't had control most of the game. They still find ways to make it tough for you. So, yeah, I am going with Indianapolis as well. I expect them to be leaning on that run game early, and we'll see if Dallas can slow them down and, force Matt Ryan to win the game at this stage of his career, which has not really been the case for Matt. So, both going Indy, but we both believe Dallas will take care of business in terms of winning the actual game because they don't care about spread. But now that's the Sunday night game. So now let's go to last but not least, the Monday nighter, and that is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They are favored by 3.5, hosting the New Orleans Saints. Always fun to see the Marshawn Lattimore, Mike Evans matchup. Although let me confirm if Lattimore's going to be playing. But nonetheless, though, Saints have kind of had Bucs numbered, or not kind of, have had the Bucs numbers for basically since the Tom Brady era began. So do you think they get them again this game, John? Or do you think the Bucs can, buck that trend? No pun intended.
I just can't. I can't take Tampa Bay. I mean, like 3.5. These matchups between these two teams are just always so close. Like I think really the only like non-close one was earlier in the season when they played, but that was also close all the way until the fourth quarter. And then Jameis Winston threw like 3 interceptions to end the game. And that's really the only reason that it wasn't close. So I just can't take Tampa Bay right now. I do think Tampa should win this one, but I don't know. These games are too scrappy for me to feel so confident that they're going to win that I'm going to pick against New Orleans. And especially, with the fact that it's 3.5, if it was 2.5, that might be a different story, but 3.5, just too many times these teams have played, and the Saints have won too many times these teams have played, and it's been too close. So I'm going with New Orleans here. They just always play them so tight. There's a lot of bad blood, and in those kind of games, things just get really ugly, and I can't take the favorite in that kind of situation.
Yeah, I'm going with New Orleans also. We mentioned defense matches up well. Marshawn Lattimore is questionable for this game. Regardless, Mike Evans had a down year this year, so I mean, I think that's also factored in for me. Also, the Bucs offense, like kind of one dimensional. Their run game really hasn't been getting going, and I anticipate that the Saints, will have a game plan. Knowing that the run game won't be too much of a factor. Focus on taking away the pass game, which like we've mentioned. They've had their number previously, so that's another disadvantage Saints right there. And then Andy Dalton's done pretty well taking care of the ball. It seems to be a point of emphasis in the recent games, and so yeah, I expect him to definitely take care of the ball. And like you mentioned too last time, I mean Jameis, they had was kind of forcing the issue late, and the score wasn't really indicative of how close the game was for the majority of the game. So I am going with New Orleans also to at least cover that 3.5. Yeah, I anticipate if Tampa does win, which I won't be shocked, it'd be a field goal, kind of a gutty 16-13 or 17-14 type game. So we both are going with the Saints to cover on Monday nights. So we believe they'll at least keep it close or maybe win. So those are the picks for week 13 of the 2022/2023 season. So John, now we go to locks, and unlike last week, I remember I'm even weeks, you're odd weeks when you start. So you get to start us off. None of us got our locks last week. I think we both had one game that didn't go our way.
Yeah, locks, man, locks. These have been tough on me.
Actually, I had one. Yeah, you're right. Sorry.
Yeah, we both got one.
That's
right.
right.
I'm gonna go with Cleveland.
Okay, that's a Cleveland covering that 7.5 over the Texans. Yep. All right, I'm going. Oof, this is tough. I'm gonna go with Seattle. I'm just gonna, not trying to kick the Rams while they're down, but that's what basically I'm doing. I'm just taking advantage of the fact that the Rams, for lack of a better word, stink right now.
Yeah.
So
I'm gonna take the Jaguars.
Oof. Okay. This is where it gets tough. I'm All right. I don't think any of us have you had put your Cowboys as a lock?
No. I know I've pretty much picked against the Cowboys every single week, I think.
All right. Well, I'm gonna test some waters here. I'm gonna pick Green Bay. I'm gonna have Green Bay be a lock. Yeah, I just feel like, especially if this is Rodgers' probable last week of this season that he might play, because he mentioned, I think on McAfee podcast, he's open to Jordan Love playing out the rest of the year. You might want to show out one more time before hanging up the cleats for the rest of the season. So I'm gonna go Green Bay. Probably gonna stop there.
This is something that we've never actually encountered, and I'm not going to do this, but I would say normally, because we like in games where we pick the same team, we can't both lock that game. But hypothetically, if I did want to take Chicago, I would say in the future, if we ever want to lock opposing sides, we can. But I'm not going to. I don't feel that confident in Chicago.
It makes it more interesting, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. Because then the winner of that game, could potentially get the locks right that week. I'm gonna take. I'm going to go bold, and I'm taking the Tennessee Titans. All right. But that's it.
I was thinking about that one, so I'm going to definitely, I'm going to get bold too. I'm going with Washington.
Okay.
I just don't have much confidence in the Giants, which I know this will be the week that the Giants, prove me wrong. So, alrighty. So we both got 3, all on Sunday. So mine, what was going on the list? So I have Washington. They are favored by 2.5 of the Giants, so I have to win by 3 or more. I have Green Bay favored by 3.5 against Chicago, so 4 or more for Green Bay. And Seattle is favored by 7.5 against the LA Rams, so that's 8+ there that the Seahawks have to win by.
And I got
John.
I got Tennessee plus 4.5 against Philly. I got Jacksonville plus 1.5 against Detroit, and I got Cleveland minus 7.5 against the Texans.
Yeah. Sorry. Yes, you're right. Because you picked 2 underdogs. Okay. So, I mean, either John can, well, unless we both get one wrong, which has happened like basically every week except for that one time I got it right. I think they have a 3-0 lead, but like we just said, if John hits all 3 of his, he ties. And then, unless I hit all 3 of mine, I just double up on the lead I have. But like I said, literally only one of us has gotten our locks right. And I've been having weeks where I only pick 2 games. So that says a lot there. So there's our picks and locks for week 13. As per usual, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Like I said, I've mentioned before, but we are on our YouTube. We are closing in on 1,000 subscribers there. Our YouTube page is Shut Up and Ball. We also have a Facebook page also. And then we do have our Instagram, which is at Shut Up and Ball Pod, and our Twitter and TikTok at Shut Up and Ball. And if you want to listen to us in your free time, we do obviously have our podcast. And that is on all podcast mediums, except for, I guess, the Amazon one, which I want to clarify. But I think that one's like you have to pay for it anyway. We're on all free podcast mediums for the most part. We're not going to... if there's a day where we get paid to be put behind a paywall, maybe. But even then, who knows? But for that big time, we may not need the paywall. Nonetheless, we'll be back next week for our week 14, our week 13 reactions and our week 14 picks and spread and such. But otherwise, hope everyone enjoys the start to their December, as we're recording December 1st. And yeah, it's starting to get colder here in Texas, and we've obviously seen that in other places if you watch NFL or live elsewhere. So winter is approaching, or winter is coming, as one of our great shows, Game of Thrones, used to always say. So yeah, stay warm and such. We'll see you all next week. Adios.